Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to mix vocals to sit perfectly in the mix. Let me start by playing you the finished vocal inside this track, and then I'll solo it up and we will break down all of the processing we're using to achieve this sound. So here's our finished vocal inside the mix.
Cause we've built our love into every piece of our here now we know.
So you can hear our vocal is up front, it sits on top of the mix. I soloed up for you so you could hear how it sounds by itself. I also took off the reverb so you could hear the dry sound and the reverb wasn't muddling up the sound for you. Let's break down the processing we're using here to make sure our vocal's sitting where it should inside this mix. Let me take everything off and I'll actually show you what our raw vocal sounds like versus our finished vocal.
Here now we know more love than these arms, cause we've built our love into every piece of our here now.
You can hear there's not a huge volume shift in and out with the processing, but there's a huge energy shift. We make sure our vocal is consistent and it stays where it should inside the track, but it also has a ton of energy, so it feels like it's the most prominent element inside our mix here. I'm going to take everything off and we're going to start by looking at our first EQ. The first thing I'm doing on the vocal here is, of course, pulling in a high-pass filter. So let me hit play, and I'll bypass and click this high-pass filter back in. I'm rolling it all the way up to about 200 hertz here using a 12 dB per octave slope. This is making sure we're rolling off all of that extra energy in the bottom end, any kind of, P's or T's or anything that's going to blow into the mic and give us excess bottom end that we don't need adding to the headroom on our vocal mix here. So here's without the high-pass, and then I'll kick it in.
Here now we know more love than these arms, cause we've built our love into here now we know more love than these arms.
Really just cleaning up the bottom end in our vocal there. You can hear on some of those roll-ins into some of the vocal lines, there's a swell of bottom end energy that we don't need on the vocal here. So rolling all of that off to make more room for the heart of this vocal sound. Now before I do any top end boosts here, I'm gonna pull in my compressor. I wanna get the vocal even before I start changing the frequency range too much here. I love using this 1176 style compressor. The energy it imparts on the vocal really helps to make sure I can sit this in one spot inside the mix and it's not gonna move, okay? So I'm rolling it at about 0.55, I can't see, there's lights in my face, for the attack here, and then 50 milliseconds on the release, 4:1 ratio. I'm pushing the input up here till we're getting about 7 to 10 dB of reduction here on the vocal. I know it seems like a lot, but I want you to listen to the before and after on the vocal here. So here's without it, and then I'll kick it in.
Here now we know more love than these arms, cause we've built our love into every piece of our here now we know more love than these arms.
So we're really squashing our vocal here with the compressor to make sure it's even. We can park it in one place. It's not going to move. We're not going to miss any of these vocal lines. But the added benefit of using an 1176 style compressor like this is the character it imparts on the vocal. To me, I feel like it really brings out the personality of the vocalist. So it takes it from being this kind of dull, more relaxed sounding vocal, and it gives it a kick of energy to make sure it feels like it should be the most prominent thing inside the track, and it grabs the listener's attention. So that's our compressor, doing about 7 to 10 dB reduction there, kind of squashing it a little bit. Now, after I get the compressor in place, this is where I'm going to boost top end. I want to make sure the vocal is consistent before I start adjusting the top end on the vocal. If I do it first, sometimes it feels weird and I have to come back and tweak it to sit right because the compressor is going to start clamping everything down here. The first thing I'm going to boost here on the vocal is this 8K range. We're doing about a 6 dB boost here at 8K, and this is going to give us some brightness, and it's going to give us that top end air on the vocal. So when we set it level-wise inside the track, it feels pretty on the top end. So take a listen without, and then I'll kick this top end, this 8K boost in.
Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art.
That's doing a ton for our vocal on the positive side as well as on the negative side. We're going to take care of that in just a second, but we're going to finish up our first vocal EQ here. That 8K boost there, that 6 dB, is giving us a ton of brightness on our vocal, and it's giving us a ton of air as well. So our vocal's really going to cut through inside of our track here. It's emphasizing the sibilance range a little bit too much, but we'll take care of that in a second. The last thing we're going to do here on our first EQ is just add a touch of this 3K area to make sure our vocal feels more full range, okay? I don't want it just to be bottom end and just top end. I want to add some mid-range bite here so it can compete with our electric guitars, our acoustic guitars, as well as our keyboards. This is a key component to making sure your vocal can compete, is making sure it has enough mid-range as well. So we're at 3K. We're going to do about a 2 dB boost here. Take a listen to how this changes our vocal.
Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know.
Really fills out the top end and the high mids on our vocal, and it's going to make sure this vocal is going to cut through all of these guitars we have going here. So when we set it inside the track, it's going to sit where it should. We covered our compressor here. Let's start dealing with some of the artifacts we got from boosting all that top end. The first thing I'm going to kick into play here is the De-Esser. I like using the Multiband here from Studio One. I know they have their actual De-Esser, and you know there's the Waves plugins and the Slate Digital De-Essers, but I like using a Multiband, so if I do need to pull in something a little bit lower as well in the 2K area, I have that option open to me. I also like all the visual cues on this, so it makes me a little bit more comfortable when I'm working on de-essing the vocal here. So we're just looking at 4K and above here on the vocal, running at 20:1 ratio, and then the fastest attack and fastest release. This makes sure we can go in, grab any harshness, grab any of that sibilance range, pull it down, and then let go, and make sure all of that air that we boosted on the vocal still comes through. So I've got the threshold pulled down to about -25, -26 here. Take a listen to what this does for our vocal. I'll play it without, and then I'll kick it in here.
Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built.
It really balances out the top end, and not only does it take care of the sibilance range and make sure our S's and our T's aren't too prominent, it evens out the top end. The top end on a vocal is where it can get really harsh and it can get pokey for the listener. So if you boost all this top end to get your air and get your brightness, and then you don't make sure it's even and consistent afterwards, you're going to get some places where it pokes out and it can get brittle for the listener. It can get pokey, can get harsh, it can get brittle, and it can hurt the listener's ears. So make sure if you boost your top end to get it bright and to get it airy, that you also contain and compress that top end so it stays even and it doesn't get harsh for the listener. Now, we've got a couple things here at the end of the chain. This is just a little bit of rounding and a little bit of polish at the end of the vocal chain here. I felt like after our compression, after our de-essing, it was a little bit too full sounding in the bottom end. You can see I messed with boosting some bottom end here, but I ended up pulling out a little bit of the low mids here around 300 hertz. We're at 279, and it's just a dB here. So just pulling down that dB to make sure our vocal's not too weighty sounding in the low mids. And then there was one frequency that was poking out here, and I could have just gone back here and pulled this boost down, but it wasn't this entire area. It was just one frequency that was starting to poke out on the vocals. So I'm pulling that down by about 6 dB. So we've got a dB cut here at about 300 hertz, and then we've got a 6 dB cut, very, very narrow, at about 4K, just to make sure our vocal isn't piercing in that frequency range. That can be the painful frequency range here. So I'm going to A-B both of these together. Listen to the bottom end and listen to the top end on our vocal. So listen to our vocal overall, and you can hear how these two moves really sit our vocal and bring everything together.
Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know more love than these arms.
Now, no more frequencies are sticking out here on our vocal. Everything is balanced. We've pulled down that low mid to make sure nothing's too heavy on our vocal. And then we found any frequencies that are harsh or pokey on our vocal and tamed those so our vocal is pleasing to listen to. Let me throw it back inside the track here. I'll A-B our processing, and I'll also solo it up so you can hear how everything is feeling. We have one more piece of the puzzle left, and that's our reverb.
Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built.
All right, we've done most of the heavy listening here on our vocal to get it sitting where we want inside the track. We've used our EQ to make sure the frequency range is balanced, and we've used our compression to make sure the volume is balanced on our vocal. This gives us the ability to kind of park it volume-wise where we want it inside the track. But the last component of getting our vocal to sit perfectly inside our track here is our front to rear depth, and that is where our reverb comes in. I like using plate reverb on vocal, and the reverb of choice for me is the CLA plate reverb is what I call it. It's just the flat plate reverb here from inside of Studio One, and then I dial it up to about 2 seconds, and then I pull up the pre-delay as well to about 152 milliseconds, and this makes sure our reverb sits after our vocal and not right on top of it. So when we pull in our reverb here, this is going to give our vocal the front to rear depth. So take a listen here without it, and then I'll activate our reverb send here, and you can hear how it places our vocal front to back inside our track here. So without it, and then with.
Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know more love than these arms, 'cause we've built our love into every piece of art. Here now we know more love than these arms.
So mixing vocals to sit perfectly inside the track is about balancing frequency range, volume, as well as your front to rear depth. We get our frequency range in control by using our EQ, rolling off any excess bottom, boosting our top to get that brightness and to get it to cut through. We balance our volume by using our compressor, squashing our vocal so we can park it in one place volume-wise. We use our De-Esser to make sure that top end's not coming out too much, using our EQ to balance any remaining frequency ranges, and then getting our front to rear depth, we pull in our reverb to set our vocal front to rear inside the mix. I hope that was helpful for you. If you're looking to go a little bit deeper into the vocal mixing process and you really want to start to perfect your EQ strategy when it comes to mixing vocals, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my ultimate guide to vocal EQ, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through how to EQ your vocals step by step to help you get polished and professional sounding vocal mixes without any more of the guesswork. Like I said, completely free to download guide, and you can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Thank you so much for watching here today, and I will see you in the next video.